Hi, my name is Cynthia England, and I'm the designer for England Design and the creator of the picture piecing technique. Today I'm going to show you how easy it is to create your own pattern. We also have an extended design lesson as a DVD that you can purchase if you would like a longer design lesson. My book, Picture Piecing, also covers the process of taking a photograph and breaking it down to make your own special quilt. To do this technique, you have to have two patterns. The patterns that we have on the website, inside the patterns, there are two. One is printed on freezer paper and one's printed on regular bond paper. So one you cut up and one you don't cut up. Tells you how to put it back together. But when you draw your own design, you draw onto freezer paper and then you make a photocopy of it. The picture piecing technique uses only straight lines. But it does have some differences between foundation piecing and paper piecing. There's no paper to pick out. There's no fabric waste. What you see is what you get. You can reuse the pattern. Use a regular stitch length. You can chain stitch, and you can sheet. And that's, if you don't sew it perfect, we can fix that. So that's a really nice thing. But we're only using straight lines. To begin, you need to gather a few supplies. They're not fancy, they're easy to get. This is freezer paper. You can get it from the grocery store. It's plastic coated. Then I have a ruler. This is tracing paper. This is an artist triangle. And the reason I like the artist triangle is because it has a long side and it has a short side. You need a pencil, and a hard lead pencil works best, not a soft one. It doesn't smear as much. And then this is a click eraser I use for erasing. And then you need a Sharpie marker at fine point and another Sharpie marker that has an ultra fine point. This is a smaller line. So that's what we need to get started. We are going to work with this Dragonfly design. You do not have to know how to draw to do this technique. This line drawing came from the internet. If you Google line drawings of dragonflies, all these line drawings will come up. So I picked one that I liked, but I did make some changes on it. What I decided is I really wanted this body to curve a little bit, and I wanted to simplify it. So I put paper over it, and I just took a Sharpie marker and I drew making these changes. So this is going to be my line drawing that I'm going to be using. Okay, first thing we're going to do is draw a box. This box is the finished size of the block. This is a 9-inch block, and you don't have to worry about any seam allowances. We're going to add those when we iron the pieces on. So I'm going to take my line drawing that I prepared, and I'm going to lay it on the block in the orientation that I want. And I want it as a kind of like a diagonal, so you can kind of move it to where you like it. And then take some Scotch tape and tape it in a couple of places just to hold it down so it's not moving on you. After the line drawing is positioned in your block, you're going to lay freezer paper shiny side down on top of this, and I'm going to redraw this same box. And what this does is it gives me a reference if the two pages get separated, but just draw the box again. And I am going to tape it down in a couple of places so it doesn't move on me. You can see through the freezer paper, and you can see the line drawing underneath. One thing that I find is helpful is to take white sheets of paper and put them behind your drawing so you have more contrast in it. The next thing we're going to do is figure out how many colors we want. This particular design, we're going to use 3 colors. We're going to use a background fabric. We're going to use, this is for the wings, so that's going to be here, and the body is going to be here. Each of these fabrics get a notation that's underneath, so those are the notations we're going to use. Alright, we're ready to start breaking this up. Now, we want to break it up so it's easy to sew back together. So there's a couple things you don't want to do. One would be you don't want to just go whacking it anywhere, Because if I drew that line, I'd have matches here that I would have to line things up when I sewed this section to this section. So that would be not what we want to do. What you want to do is you want to find something that goes clear across that doesn't really interfere with anything else. See, I could catch the two of those, or I could just draw a line like this. I could take the same design and do it, break it out tomorrow, totally different, but it doesn't matter. All that matters is that we can sew this thing back together. So now your first line has to go from the end of the box to the end of the box. And so I'm going to start here at the box, and I'm going to go all the way down until I hit the box again. Every line starts at a line and ends at a line. So now let's just look at this part right here. We're going to make a couple sections out of this. And what I'm going to do is find a line that I can pull out. This one looks pretty good. Now draw the line all the way till you hit the box. And now I'm just going to work in this little group. And one thing that I have students do a lot is they will stop and then they turn it and draw again. You can't turn it, because if you do that, you have an inset. You have to start at the line and go all the way until you extend out and touch the edge. Now you can keep going around this way, or you can change directions. Now to get, this is like an inside curve, and to get inside there you have to go straight, and then you turn, and then you do that. So that is finished. So now we're going to come over here and draw this. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this here. I don't want the wings to be pointy, so I'm doing them this way. Pull the line out. Pull the line out. It has to touch. Got to go all the way till you touch something. Now I can keep going this way, or I could stop and go this way. It does not matter. What matters is that I start at a line and end at a line. And then this is my last one there. And then I have a curve here. To get this, I am going to go in like this and back out like this. Okay, so this half of the dragonfly is complete. So we'll go over here and break up something else. Okay, that wouldn't be bad. And you move this triangle around and see what you think might be a good place to start. I'm just going to go ahead and draw this line. Start at the line I drew before, all the way out till you touch the box. Okay, so let's see. Let's move this around. Let's catch the edge of this. This is a curve here, so I'm going to start here and go all the way out. Okay, now here's a, like that. Now, if I left this pointy, the head on the dragonfly would be pointy. I don't want that, so I'm going to draw this little line. Now, this is a little bitty evil piece, but I'm going to show you how easy it is to sew that in a minute. So sometimes you have to have small pieces. Okay, pull that out. I can catch this. As you can see, it's not a real big brainer thing, and you can go in between. Like I could make this one piece, or I could make it two pieces. If I wanted a finer curve, I could make it two, but it's a dragonfly wing. I'm just going to do one piece. Just start and stop. Okay, now this is a little curve here. If I want it to be a curve, then I have to cut inside the shape and then come back out. That gives me a curve. And then this is the last, well, I've got this and this. Let's see here. So this would be good, and this, that's finished. Okay, so all I have left is this body, and it's curved. There's a little curve there, so I'm going to show you how we're going to get that. First, I'm going to do the end, and then I'm going to do a couple lines here to get that body curving. And to get this little part here, I'm going to go in like this and then back out again. And that does give you a small piece, but it's very workable. Okay, so now you can lift your freezer paper up and you can see that the whole drawing is made. You won't have every line touches everything, and it's complete. So now we've got to break it down so we can see where the main sections are to make it easier to sew. And I'm using this Sharpie fine point marker here, and I'm going to break it down into major sections. And these major sections have bold lines, and we're going to give them a bold letter. So I would say those are my main sections, and then I'm going to label them. Okay, so these bold lines are your major sections, and you're going to label them A, B, C, D, however many there are. I'm going to flip this around so I can do my my notations upright. All right, so here's A and B, and now I'm going to do C, and I'm putting C away from B on purpose because you can't sew this section to that. So by putting the letter up here, I know I have to sew these two, I have to sew these two, and then I can put them together. Okay, now for the next notation. What I'm going to use now is this ultrafine Sharpie, and I'm going to look in the sections and see where there's little groups. And these are little subsections that, if I mark them with a dotted line, help me when I go to sew. If you look in section B here, there's a line right here, and I have to sew these two guys together before I can sew these two. So I'm going to put this as a dotted line. And what the dotted lines are designed to do is so that when you look at the section, you can kind of glance and see where you've got to start. So in this section D here, there's a line right here. Now I have to sew these two together, and I have to sew these two. So I'm going to put a dotted line right there. Now when you're designing, you can put too many dotted lines in, and they don't help you anymore. So I'm not marking a whole lot of them. This is section C. I see there's one here that I think would help me out. I've got to sew these two first, so I'm going to do those. And then I think, actually there's several. I could do this one. Now these dotted lines do not have to go all the way to the end of the box. They just have to go to the end of the next line where they touch another line. And that's probably, well, I'll put one more here. Okay, so now I've got this section up here. There's really, I could put this one. I think that may help me, give me a clue as to what I've got to start doing, what I need to start sewing. Okay, so my dotted lines are all made now. The next notation I'm going to add is I'm going to add the colors. As we talked about before, these are my colors that I'm going to use. So everything that's background, I'm going to put a B. So B is for background. That one is really small, but I'm going to show you how to get rid of it. Just because they're little, that doesn't mean they're hard. You can do it. There's a lot of backgrounds. Okay, and then everything that's the wings on the dragonfly, I'm going to put a W. So these are the wings. So every single pattern piece has a color notation on it, and that's going to correspond to your color chart. After I do the wings, I'm going to do the body of the dragonfly, and it's an X. Okay, now you can, what I usually do is do like B for background, or G for green, or R for red, but X is the body, because I already used B for body, so that's why I'm picking X. So now all of the fabrics have been marked on the pattern. Now I have to number it for sewing sequence. Now foundation piecing, you sew in order by number. In this technique, you sew by length of pattern piece. So if we look in section A here, and what really helps me when I'm dividing something up is I will take blank paper and I will block it off so I'm not looking at the whole pattern. And this is a very simple little thing, but it helps a whole lot. So let me just grab some, see how, just blocking that, now I'm just looking at this. Okay, so what could I sew here? 2 pieces, there's only 2 in this section that you can sew. See these 2 guys, they're the same length. Nothing's between them, they share a common seam. So if this is number 1, I can sew number 2. So those 2 are now sewn together. Once they're together, they're big enough for this one. And you go through, now all of these are together, so then I can add this one. Everything is a straight line. You never inset, you never backstitch. This is 6 and this is 7. You would not sew these 2 pieces together. They are both backgrounds, but they're not the same length. See, one is a lot longer. So section A is finished. Section A done, now we're down to section B. Okay, so look at the section and ask yourself which 2 pieces share a common seam. There are 2 choices in this section. It's either these 2 guys here or these 2 guys here. It doesn't matter which one is number 1. Okay, so if I make this number 1, then I'm going to make this number 2 because I can sew those together. After they're together, they're big enough for that guy. So I'm not going to put, now it's number 4. And 4 is going to go up in here. So I can sew this piece to this piece. Then after those are sewn, I can sew these 2 to this group of 3. Now the other thing the dotted line is for is it's kind of like a fence. I have to sew everything on this side of the fence and everything on this side of the fence before I can sew them together. I like to think of it as a fence. It helps me when I sew. Okay, so now 5, I now have all of these sewn together, so they're now big enough for this one. Once this one's hooked on, I can add this one and that one. Each section has a new series of numbers. So there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on in each section. So when you sew, you only sew one section at a time so you don't get confused. So now we're on to our biggest section. This is section C, and it has all these dotted lines in it that we put. So we're still looking for any 2 that we can sew together. They just share one common seam. It could be these 2, or it could be these 2, or these 2, or these, or these. So it doesn't matter which one is number 1 and number 2. One huge advantage of this technique is that you can chain stitch. You cannot chain stitch in foundation. And what you would do is just pin all these you can sew and chain stitch them. But let's start with our number 1 and number 2. Let's start down here. Okay, so if this is number 1 and this is number 2, once they're put together, I can add this one. So that means this little group is now complete. So I've got to come on this side and make these 2 up. So if I sew this 4 to this 5, they're together, then I'll hook them onto this. Then they would be big enough for this piece. So now I have that group completed. So now I'm going to come up here. Okay, so number 7. So I can sew 7 to 8. These 2 together, they can now be hooked onto this. And number 9 and number 10. And this is 10. So now we're going to sew this. I can either do these small pieces or I can do this big piece. I'm going to jump down to the larger piece. And this is going to be number 11. And then this piece would be 12. Okay, now see, I cannot put this piece on because I have to build these 2 and add them on. So this would be 13 and this would be 14. My evil piece that I will show you how to do. And then this is 15. So all of these have to be sewn together before I hook that one on. This could be a dotted line because you do have to sew all those together. But it's pretty obvious that you have to sew, that big piece can't go on. You can put too many dotted lines, like I said before. Like this could be a dotted line. If I put that a dotted line, I would have so many dotted lines I would get confused. So the dotted lines are just there so you can glance at the section and see where the main groups are. Okay, so we finished section C. Now on to section D. We're going to zoom in on section D so you can see it better. Now, if you look in section D, which two pieces share one common seam? There are two options. These two or these two. Doesn't matter which one's number one. I'm going to go for the big one. So I'm going to go 1, 2. Now I've got those sewn together, so I have to build these two together. So I'm going to make this 3, 4. Now you would sew this to this and add this, and this would be your last one. Okay, so we have the whole pattern drawn out now. We have major bold lines telling us when the major sections are. Each one is marked with a letter. Inside the sections, we have dotted lines to show us where the little groups are that we have to sew. Each section has a color notation and a sewing notation. After this is done, I see there's one place in this pattern that I want to line up just right, and it's right here. When this section D is sewn to this section C, I want it to line up right there. And I call this a circle over an intersection. And this is a picky place. So if you see this notation when you sew, you're just going to put a pin there because we want the dragonfly body to line up. So that's why that circle is there. After the drawing is made, you're going to take it and go to your copy machine and make a Xerox copy of the freezer paper. We're going to cut the freezer paper apart, and the copy is going to become your master pattern and tell you how to put it back together. So I took my freezer paper pattern that all the notations are marked, and I went and made a copy of it. Now my block is a 9-inch block, so it won't fit on a single sheet of paper. So you just make 2 copies, one of each half, and what I did is I trimmed off one edge, and I'm going to overlap that like this, and then I'm just going to tape it together, and this is going to become my master pattern. And it doesn't have to be perfect, just kind of lay it over there. Okay, and you run your Scotch tape all the way down. It just makes it a little easier. So this is now my master pattern, and then this is my freezer paper, and I'm going to cut up the freezer paper, and the master pattern is going to tell me how to put it back together. Now we're going to cut down the middle of the black bold line, and you can rotary cut this if you want to. On these major sections, I use these Karen K. Buckley scissors because they're serrated, and these things I can cut paper and fabric. Okay, so I'm going to cut these lines just down the middle, and you can use a rotary cutter, but I'm using these Karen K. Buckley scissors. They're serrated, and you can use them for paper and fabric, and they don't hurt the scissors. The paper doesn't hurt it. They're just pretty wonderful. Anyway, cut down the middle, and it doesn't have to be perfect. And now, as you're working with this, you don't have to do section A first. Any section is fine. So you don't have to go A, B, C, D. Also, when you're cutting, every line should be a straight line when you're cutting. In other words, I could cut this line, but I would not want to cut this line. See how I run into something? So it's easier when you're going to cut it just to think of it as a slice of pizza. I'm going to cut off everything, and I'm just going straight, because remember when I drew it, I drew from line to line, so I should be able to cut it from line to line. And as you cut up a section, you'll see here, see these 2 pieces? I could keep these 2 pieces together, because what we can do is pre-sew colors. Okay, I'm going to cut out this section B here. Now, you don't have to do the sections in order at all. I like to prep everything and get it ready first. But your first lines are going to be the ones you can slice off. In other words, see how this line I can go all the way across. So I'm going to draw this, cut this line. And here. and here. And I like to use a little tray, a plastic tray underneath, and I would put all the same color pieces together. These are all bees, so I'm going to put them in a little stack. So when I go to iron, I have, and I'll even drop the pieces as I go in that stack. Okay, now I'm down to these two, and I'm not going to cut this one off or this one off. I'm going to cut this dotted line. Now, do you see how these two share the common seams? These are the ones that we're going to iron on to our prepped fabric. And this information is in more detail in our video on helpful info. So if you go and watch those videos, but I'm going to show you here what I would do to get those two pieces. Okay, so we have these two small pieces that share a common seam that are next to each other. So what we're going to do is look on our color chart, and we're going to sew the wings and the background together. And what we're going to do with that is we're going to iron the pieces on the line, just like that. And this freezer paper will stick to the fabric, and that way we don't have to sew that little bitty piece. Now you do want to make sure you leave a finger's width between, because that way you cut down the middle and you've got plenty of seam allowance. Because when we cut this, you're going to cut a quarter, actually a little larger than a quarter of an inch. So I'm going to just cut one of these out so you can see about how big. Now, we do have a sewing video that's free online that you can watch, and it will watch that and it'll help you sew this together. Okay, you remember that little evil piece I was telling you about that looked really hard? This is the master pattern, and I'm going to show you how to sew this little bitty piece. As you can see, once the piece is cut out of the freezer paper and you add the seam allowance, it's bigger than it actually is, it looks. So when you're working with it, it's really a ½ inch larger. Okay, to get this little bitty piece, what you do, well, let me pull this back. What you do is you fold back this one line here, this little tiny piece, fold it towards you, and then you take some scissors and you trim away about a quarter of an inch. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then you take a scrap of whatever color that is. This is our background. And I'm going to butt that up against the line here. And then I'm going to take a pin, and I'm going to drag this pin, and it falls in where there's no paper, and you come back up and you pinch fold it. That's where I'm going to sew. So I'm going to sew that line. The fold is where the paper is, so I want to sew a little away from it. Okay, so when I sew, I want to sew on this side of that fold. I don't want to sew over the fold. That's the danger line. Now, the thing to remember is you don't have to sew perfect. You're using a normal stitch length, and especially if it's a little bitty one, I will just sew a line that I know is off. Because this is freezer paper, and you can move freezer paper. So what I'm going to do is pull this back and see what I have here. And I'm way off. See how far off? But it doesn't matter, because I can take this piece and I can move that over and press it and then cut around it. So I'm really not trying to sew an exact seam. I am trying to trim it after I've sewn the seam. And that's how you get rid of little pieces. Okay, so this is the Dragonfly line drawing we started with. And then we put our freezer paper over it and broke it into parts. And this became our master pattern. And it's all straight lines. There's no curves. And here's our finished dragonfly. So you can see you can get very close to what it is. And it's all straight lines. You're not having to pick any paper out or anything. And you can take any photograph, any line drawing, and do this. It is not hard. So this little dragonfly block, you can use it several ways. You could just put a piece border on it and make it into a little pillow. Or you could also make several of them and lay them out in a square, and you can face them towards each other to make a design, so they're all facing in, or you could face them out. So there's different ways to use it. It's a kind of a diagonal design. So there's a couple of ideas for you to use this dragonfly design. You can also go to our website and watch the sewing tutorials. It's going to help you before you go to sew this. It also helps you to understand the designing if you know how it has to be sewn together. Now, if you're looking for an extended lesson on designing, I have a DVD that explains how to take a photograph and how to break it down to do your own design. And I also have a book called Picture Piecing, and that is what the subject is for that book too, showing you in detail how to take a photograph and break it down. To learn the design process, I think it's a lot easier to sew something first so you understand the sewing, and then learn how to break it apart. We've included the Dragonfly pattern as a link here that you can practice with. We also have some free videos that are on sewing on our website as well that will help you.